So next we're going to talk about a little bit more about our resources and a webtop. We're not going to talk about the network resource yet. We'll do that after lunch. So we're going to focus on the portal resource and a couple of others as well. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about a webtop. What is a webtop? Ophir could tell us this because you covered this, I believe, in your presentation. How many of you have been to our VPN page where you log into Federate or something like that and you see all those icons? That is the webtop. Webtop is a landing page where we can put a variety of different resource types on there. So when I was taking my laptop home and all of a sudden I saw, I only have access to a couple of things, that's because I would have a lot less icons on my webtop. They're usually broken down into two categories: network access resources and all of our other resource types, which is called applications and links. So how do I create one of these? Very easy to do. Use the wizard. If you use the wizard, it creates it for you. If you want, you can create your own, because it is possible and very feasible that you might have more than one webtop. For example, I might have a webtop for my employees, for their VPN, and actually, let me rephrase that. Knowing that I can do so much in one access policy, I've realized I don't need two VIPs for that. I actually just need one VIP and one access policy, and I can do it all. And in that one access policy, I could have multiple webtops for different kinds of users. So my partners would see a customized webtop for them.
But can you dictate the ratio of CCUs?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
We would lose that ability, because that is a top-level profile setting. So if I want to create multiple webtops, you're typically going to use full, give it a name, and then decide. So if I'm only providing network tunnel access, that's it. This VPN is just used for tunnel access, then you can use a network access webtop. A network access webtop it's not a landing page with a lot of resources. The idea of a network access webtop is you connect to your VPN, the webtop immediately minimizes and hides away, and you just have your network connection. You don't have to have a landing page of any kind. The important thing about the webtop, though, this is interesting. The webtop is what holds your connection open. That's your connection. So anytime you close the webtop, whether it's the network access webtop or your landing page webtop, that's what closes your session. Releases your access session license and your CCU license. A portal access webtop you'll never use, so don't even worry about it. It's for backwards compatibility before we ever had the full webtop. So the full webtop is what you want to use if you want that landing page with a variety of resource types on it. And then we have a couple of other features here. I'll show you what a couple of these are. First off, I don't know why you would ever want to minimize your landing page to the tray, hide it from your users, but you could. And then the URL on entry field and the show search, resource search, I'll show you what those are in a moment when we look at a picture of it. All right. So the nice thing about the webtop is it can be fully customized. I like to say we have the easy, intermediate, and advanced configuration options. The average user can do the beginning and the intermediate, which is what you'll do in your exercise. Advanced requires somebody with some good HTML, XML type of programming skills, and then they could totally change the whole look of this page. But some of the easy stuff we can do is we can change all the icons. Notice the icons by default are these very bland pictures. And then also notice my names of these don't look very user-friendly. And by the way, the reason those names look like that is because by default, the caption, which is what we see, is the same as the resource name. And we can't have spaces in names for objects in BIG-IP, so that's why they look so bad. But we can easily go in and have customized captions, images, and in some cases even a little more extended description if we wanted. We can also change things like the logo up at the top. You know, it's surprising to me that not all customers like to have our wonderful F5 logo on their web top. Go figure. But we can change that. We can also change some of the coloring. So I've got a nice blue box up there. We can change some stuff over here. I can change that, you know, the message they see up at the top. And then notice my help now says Lorax Webtop Help. The find a resource, a Webtop resource, that's what that one checkbox was where it said resource search. And that could be useful if I've got 100 icons here and it's really hard. Unfortunately, they're not always alphabetized, so finding the icon you're looking for is a little challenging, so that they can use that search to find it really easily. Then this thing right there, enter an internal Lorax, so two things about that. First off, that is the URL on entry field, which was another checkbox when we created the Webtop. Now what that does is it enables a user to access resources inside the network, web-based resources, HTTP. It enables users to access web-based resources that are not on this page. And they can access any web-based resource that's not on that page if they know the URL of it.
On the internal?
No, anything on the internal through APM.
Cannot be external?
You wouldn't need to do that for that.
Why not?
You know, you can just go to your URL and go to an external site.
I have some use case about that.
Okay.
For example, a university that needs to access to some research engines or something like that, and they are only able to navigate through there through one API.
So for that, I would say I'll probably make it an icon just to make it easier. I've never tried it. I imagine you could go to any site, but you guys could even try it in your exercise. When I have you go to an internal URL, you could also go to yahoo.com, and it probably will work. So why would some administrators want to remove that field?
Because you want to enforce the connections.
I want to enforce what they can access. And that's why a lot of times, and you'll see that for our VPN Webtop, we don't have that field for F5 users. But you'll notice the second point about this is I can also customize what users see as the default text inside of there. I can also customize these category names in any way I want, and I can customize my footer. Those are some of the easy and intermediate settings. Advanced, like I said, lets you do anything you want to that page, but a bit more complicated.
What dictates the order in which the icons are displayed?
Good question. I have no idea. You would think it'd be alphabetical, wouldn't you?
There's no something.
I always like to say, I don't create our UI. So I don't know all those answers.
Okay.
And I don't always agree with the things that are done, because I'm very particular about good UI, UX design, user experience stuff. All right, so a couple of our resource types that we're going to talk about. The first is a portal resource, web applications. The second is a Webtop link, typically external websites. Then we're going to talk about that remote desktop that we talked about, having RDP access to things, or Citrix client access to things, internal desktops. And then finally, what I like to call the client-server app, or the app tunnel is what they're called, which is where I need more than portal access, but I don't need full network access. But in order to access this application, I need one or more servers listening on one or more ports. So let's start with portal access, providing portal access. So again, this is going to, by the way, you'll notice the word enable. It enables users to access web-based applications. As a reminder, must be only the HTTP-based web applications. They make their connection, SSL. They're going to authenticate, do whatever they need to do. And then in this case, the user wants to access oa.lorax.com. Notice the VPN is called vpn.lorax.com. With a portal resource, when they get their page of OA, if they're a savvy user, they could look at the URL and say, I'm not going to oa.lorax.com, I'm going to vpn.lorax.com with this really strange text after it. And this is because what APM and SSL VPNs do with portal resources is a reverse proxy, acting as a reverse proxy. And the main reason for doing a reverse proxy for protection is to hide this name from any visible access on the page. So if you look at any link on the page, you're not going to see a link to this. You're going to see a link to this. So what that is it's the host name of the VPN followed by a hashed value of this. And because we do reverse proxying, that adds a benefit of security, but it sometimes causes poorly coded web applications to not always work properly. This was the case with Aventail's VPN as well. And there's only so much we can do when an application isn't coded well, but we can do a little bit. We can do a little bit for the customer to help them get it to work properly. When you're creating your portal resources, everything we're going to do is under the access menu. And somebody was asking about access sessions, and there is an option down here that says access sessions. You can look at that to see the access sessions. You had looked at that a little bit ago, right? Oh, is it up here now? Okay, because they moved it. They totally redesigned the APM menu system in V13, which quite frankly caused me a lot of extra work. I had to create all new screenshots for everything. I don't know why they do things like that, but I digress. So now we go to our new resource for portal access. Going to give it a name. Again, you can't have spaces in your names. Remember that. What these are for is if they are having some issues with the reverse proxy and the application, maybe our support will help them with a couple of these, say turn off that patching and so forth, see if it works. Under most circumstances, you don't have to adjust any of those. And then you're going to specify the application itself by either IP address or host name. If you're using host name, just make sure BIG-IP can resolve that host name, or else it won't work. And then this is where we have that caption, which as I said, defaults to whatever name. So we can put in whatever caption we want with spaces. We can put in a description if we want. This has a very limited character count. I mean, very limited. It might be 20. It might even be 15. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure why that is. And then we can go and pick any kind of custom image we want. The only thing I tell you to caution your customers about is it creates a very small picture of that image. So if it's some sort of a detailed picture, they're not going to be able to tell what it is when they see it on their webtop. It'll just look like a blob. So just be cautious with that. And that's all there is to creating a portal resource. That's it. Pretty easy to do. Remember that this is going to require that rewrite profile attached to the virtual server. You're going to use your wizard, the portal access setup wizard, and that wizard will create the virtual server for you. You're going to actually create a new virtual server for this, and it'll attach the rewrite profile for you automatically. Make life a lot easier. So next is a Webtop link. A Webtop link is also a web application, but more often than not, it's an external web application. So for example, on our Webtop at F5, we have an icon for Concur, our travel site. That's not inside F5's network. So we only have that icon for users to do two things. One is to make it easier to get to that, and number two, we've also enabled single sign-on for that application as well, which can be nice, but it still resides outside the network. So all I have to do is give it a name. It's kind of like favorites and bookmarks. We give it a name, give it a URL, give it a caption. How do you suppose this fits into our CCU discussion? I'm sorry? It does not, is that what you said?
I think it creates, because it's anyway a resource that you are accessing from the portal.
It's an APM policy. It's like a virtual server, so it's APM access.
So what I said earlier was that if it's an APM resource, it does require a CCU with the exception of Webtop Links.
You were right at first.
Yeah. Because we're not, APM, think of it this way, I'm just turning the sound down, there we go. Think of it this way. APM isn't really giving us access to this it's just pointing us to somewhere. So it's not really in charge of, APM can't say, hey Vincenzo, I'm giving you access to Concur. We don't have anything to do with Concur. We're just pointing you to Concur. So it does not require a CCU. That's important to note. There we go. We also don't do reverse proxy. It's like a redirect. Yeah. So no reverse proxying. That also, reverse proxying is also something that requires the CCU. So we don't provide the reverse proxy for that. Then we have those remote desktops. They made a big change in V13. Prior to V13, all of remote type desktop access was agent-based, which was nice because I could run a remote desktop connection without using remote desktop connection. I didn't have to pull up the remote desktop like you guys have been doing in your lab and then put in the IP address or something like that. It's actually an agent-based, it was an agent-based version of it. So I could actually be like a public kiosk that didn't have RDP set up, and I could potentially RDP into my Exchange server to manage it. We still have that option. It's still available. But they've also added something new, and I'll show it to you in a moment, and then I'll explain why. But that's where I'm going to create it, my VDI RDP Remote Desktops section. We're going to give it a name like we always do. We're going to select the type. You'll see we have 3 types there. You would need to know more about Citrix to set up your Citrix connection, more about VMware View to set that up, or more about RDP to set that up. But all of these settings from here down will change depending on which of those 3 you select. So I've just got some screenshots for RDP. So this is the new feature. This is the new feature that was added. And the reason it was added was because not all devices would allow this agent to run. So without this agent, I couldn't RDP in. So we've changed it to also allowing native access, which means if I've got RDP access to the Exchange server natively, I don't need a network access resource. If I had a network access tunnel, I could RDP to all of my servers just using remote desktop. But I don't have network access. I also am not using a client-server app tunnel. What this means is I can open up my remote desktop connection and natively get access to that Exchange server. That's really what this is all about. So I can decide whether I want to do native, requiring them to have RDP of some sort on their device, or ActiveX, which is then going to be agent-based, or of course Java for Macs. Then I just put in the resource itself, the name. We're always going to use 3389 for Windows for RDP sessions. We can enable single sign-on. So you guys just did your logon of sales user password. If that's the same logon for the Exchange server, that of course makes life a lot easier for them. And that's pretty much it. Down here at the bottom, you've got some other stuff like the screen size and other settings. You also have the caption down below and the image graphic you can use as well. But that's pretty much the bulk of setting that up. As a reminder, also new in V13, if I'm going to use one of these, then my virtual server has to have another profile attached. I think it's called a VDI profile. So that's new. And you guys will do that in your exercise, so you'll see. And again, you can typically just use a default profile that's already on the BIG-IP. You don't have to usually go in and configure anything more complicated than that. And then the last one we're going to talk about is called an application tunnel or an app tunnel. This is what I've been referring to as a client-server application. The idea here is let's say we have a custom Lorax app. It's what my users use to put in their time system. So this application was developed. It's not a web app. We actually have a client program that they set up, that they run. And that client program talks to the server. But it's more than HTTP. So in order to do client-server connection, we've got to have access to the server in a variety of ports. Maybe the server needs another server. There's 2 application servers. Who knows? That's what we're going to set up here. So we've got the same place, connectivity, app tunnels. We're going to give it that name. By the way, what I'm setting up here, this is just the resource name, not the resource items. That's why this screen's so minimal. So I give it a name, I give it a caption, click on finished, I think it's finished, or create. That's another thing about our UI that makes me crazy. Sometimes it says finished, sometimes it says finish, sometimes it says create, save. Yeah, you're right, yes. It's different in BIG-IQ as well. Yeah. So down here now is where I have my resource items. So this is where I'm going to add each server and port or ports that are needed for this app to run. So for each one of these, I will put the server information. I'll put the port information. And then you can also specify if you want the traffic between this client and that server to have some compression, to save some bandwidth. And then once I create this, here we go, finished now. Once I create this, I could create another one if there's another server that needs to be involved or other ports on this same server. And by the time I'm done, this is what my app tunnel will look like. So I've got several servers and ports. And this will also become an item on their desktop, on their Webtop that they can then launch up. So as soon as they launch that icon on their Webtop, then their client will have that access to those back-end servers through APM.
So this is similar to that will be some in Juniper, say? Somebody that is familiar with Juniper. Is similar to that?
Not really. This is more than forwarding.
Yeah, but you need something that catches this information.
I have Java.
And send to
Java.
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 Is it Java-based?
Java.
It does require an agent on the client to do this.
That's
W Summit.
Okay, then yes.
It's a good safe guess that a lot of what makes this work requires agents. And again, that makes us no different from our competitors as well. So now I've got all these new resource types that I've created. I've created 10, 20 resources. Now I want to be able to decide which resources I want to make available to my users. Now right now, my access policy is limited. In the next lesson, we'll start talking about how I can really control this based on who they are. But right now I'm just saying, hey, if you can authenticate, you get authenticated, you can have these resources. So basically all users from Active Directory, or let's just say all my employees, get access to all these resources. Now when I take my laptop home, I'm going to get the same resources when I'm at home. When I connect to my mom's computer, I'll get the same resources because the policy is very basic at this time. But I want to add those new resources. Anybody know what I'm going to click on up there? What was it?
It says to insert a new action, click on the plus sign.
I don't know if I've heard it from anybody yet. I might have. Did anybody say Advanced Resource Assign? Okay. I'm going to click on Advanced Resource Assign. And that's going to bring up this little box. This is the box where we can add all of those. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not right. This is how I configure my resource access for my advanced resource assign. So right now you'll see the two resources that are being provided. We have a portal resource, portal access resource, and a Webtop. That's it. Because I use the wizard. This is what yours is going to look like when you first go in. Anybody guess what I'm going to click on now to add more resources? Add delete. Everybody say add delete? Yeah. That should be fairly intuitive as well. And now across the top, you're going to see all the tabs of the different categories of resources we've covered. Portal access resources, Webtop links, remote desktops, so forth and so on, app tunnels. So for each one of these, you'll notice two numbers. The first number is the number of this resource that we currently have in this policy, or in this item, I should say, in this item. And then the second number is the number of resources of this type that are available to put on there. So for each one of these tabs, I'm just going to select it. And when you select it, you'll see all the different resources that are available. Hopefully we've given them good enough names so that I actually can recognize them here. And then I'll just select the ones that I want to include. And I'll do that all the way along on all these tabs. And then we'll click on Update. And now you'll see our list of resources is more expanded. Save it. And then important up there at the top is going to be a link that says Apply Policy. Sounds a little bit like ASM. So just like ASM, anytime you're making changes to something about the access policy or the access profile, for example, if you change the maximum sessions per user, anytime you make one of those changes, you have to apply the policy. And then the last thing I would do is I would just log on to the Webtop myself. I would make sure everything looks right. I might click on some of those links to make sure they pop up correctly, the way that I would expect them to. And then we are done. Any questions about our resource types? Again, it's fairly straightforward, I think. So next exercise, no surprise, you're going to create some resource types. First off, you're going to use the wizard to create a whole new policy, whole new virtual server. Then you're going to add some more resources to it. You're going to do portal resources, Webtop links. You'll do a couple of remote desktop resources. And then you get to go in and customize your Webtop a little bit and change the way it looks. So let's take a total of 45 minutes, which takes us to 11. And I saw some of you taking breaks earlier, but make sure you have time for a break and smoke, a coffee, bathroom, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock.